I stood near the open casket, trying to make myself invisible, a skill I had perfected over 33 years of being the backup daughter, but my sister, Veronica, had no intention of letting me fade into the wallpaper. She cornered me between the floral arrangements and the grieving investors, her voice cutting through the hushed murmurs like shattered glass. "You are a leech," she announced, staring right at me. "And you are not taking a single dime of this family's money." The road back to Briar Glen was exactly as I remembered it. A winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through Maryland horse country, flanked by fences that cost more than my car. It had been raining for 3 days. A relentless gray drizzle that turned the landscape into a watercolor painting left out in the damp. The windshield wipers of my sedan slapped back and forth. A metronome counting down the miles to a life I thought I had escaped. My father, Edmund Rivera, was dead. The news had come via a phone call from his executive assistant, a woman named Beverly who sounded like she was reading from a script. Cardiac arrest, business trip, sudden, painless. The words were clipped, efficient, and entirely devoid of the messiness that usually accompanies death. I had not cried. That was the thing that worried me the most as I drove past the sign welcoming me to the town of my childhood. I felt a hollow ache in the center of my chest, a physical pressure like a bruised rib, but there were no tears. I was 33 years old, and I had spent the last decade training myself to be practical, to be the one who handled the logistics while everyone else handled the drama. I pulled into the parking lot of the funeral home, a sprawling brick colonial that looked more like a senator's estate than a place for the dead. The lot was full. My father was a man of influence, a pillar of the community, a donor to the arts, a titan of local industry. To the world, he was Edmund Rivera, the philanthropist and businessman. To me, he was a series of silence and expectations, a man who showed love by paying tuition and expected loyalty to be silent. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. Dark circles, pale skin, hair pulled back in a severe knot. I looked like a woman preparing for a deposition, not a daughter preparing to say goodbye. I took a breath, held it for 4 seconds, and let it out. Do not fight, I told myself. Get in. Pay respects. Survive Veronica. Get out. The air inside the funeral home was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. A sea of black suits and tasteful dresses parted as I walked toward the front of the room. I kept my head down, nodding at faces I vaguely recognized. Business partners, board members, neighbors who had not spoken to me in 10 years. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I was the other daughter, the one who left, the one who worked for a nonprofit in the city instead of taking a vice president title at Blue Heron Freight Works. And then there was Veronica. My sister stood near the casket like she was hosting a gala. She was wearing a black dress that was tailored to within an inch of its life, her makeup flawless, her posture rigid. She was holding court, accepting condolences with a gracious, practiced nod. She looked beautiful. She always did, but I knew the tension in her jaw. I knew the way her eyes darted around the room, assessing, calculating, measuring the crowd. When she saw me, the performance stopped. The room seemed to go quiet, though perhaps that was just the blood rushing in my ears. Veronica excused herself from a weeping elderly woman and walked toward me. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor, a sharp staccato rhythm that sounded like gunfire. "Samantha," she said. Her voice was loud, too loud for a funeral. It carried over the hushed conversations, slicing through the polite murmur of grief. "Hello, Veronica," I said, keeping my voice low. I reached out, instinctively, to offer a hug, a touch, something human in the middle of this sterile pageant. She stepped back. The rejection was physical. A slap without the contact. "Don't," she said. I froze. People were watching now. I could feel their eyes, heavy and judgmental, pressing against my back. "We can do this later," I said, trying to keep my face neutral. "Not here. No, we will do it here," Veronica said. She turned slightly. ensuring her voice projected to the circle of people nearest us: father's attorney, the bank manager, the mayor. She wanted an audience. She needed witnesses. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something manic in her eyes. It wasn't grief, it was fear. It was the terrified aggression of a cornered animal. "You have some nerve showing up here," she said, her voice trembling with a manufactured rage. "After everything you put him through, I haven't done anything. Veronica," I said, "I'm here to bury our father. You are here to see what you can grab." She snapped. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "You are a leech. Samantha." The word hung in the air, ugly and visceral. A leech. I felt the heat rise up my neck. I remembered the winter 3 years ago when father's personal accounts were frozen due to an administrative error while he was in Europe. I was the one who paid the heating bill for the big house. I was the one who covered the property tax installment so there wouldn't be a lien. I was the one who wired money to Veronica when her lifestyle brand failed. Money she promised to pay back and never mentioned again. I had receipts in a shoebox in my apartment. Silent testament to years of quiet solvency while she played the role of the wealthy heiress. But I said nothing. To defend myself would be to engage. And to engage was to lose. "You lived off him your whole life," Veronica shouted. She was crying now, or pretending to. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes remained cold. "You drained him. You manipulated him. And now you think you can just waltz in here and take whatever is left? You don't deserve a cent." I looked around the room. The faces of the mourners were masks of shock and judgment. They didn't know about the heating bills. They didn't know about the loans. They only knew what they saw. The dutiful older sister protecting the legacy from the estranged, greedy younger sibling. It was a narrative Veronica had been crafting for years. And tonight was the premiere. "I am not doing this with you," I said. My voice was steady, though my hands were shaking inside my coat pockets. "Get out," Veronica hissed. "Get out of my sight." I turned and walked away. I did not run. I did not look back. I walked past the casket without stopping, past the flowers, past the staring eyes. I walked out into the rain, the cool dampness hitting my face like a reprieve. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the gray sky. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "You are a leech." The injustice of it burned in my throat, bitter and acidic. But beneath the anger, there was a cold knot of realization. This wasn't just a temper tantrum. This was a strategy. Veronica was planting a flag. I started the engine. I had a meeting to get to. Daryl Klein's office was located in a renovated townhouse on the edge of the business district. Klein Morcant, LLP, had handled the Rivera family business for 40 years. Daryl himself had bounced me on his knee when I was a toddler. He was a soft man, round-faced, and perpetually anxious. The kind of lawyer who excelled at filing paperwork but crumbled under direct conflict. When I walked into his conference room, he didn't stand up. He was sitting at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by stacks of files. He looked pale. He was sweating, despite the chill in the room. "Samantha," he said. He sounded tired. "I am so sorry for your loss. Thank you." "Daryl," I said, taking the seat opposite him. I didn't want to waste time. After the scene at the funeral home, I needed facts. "What is the situation?" Daryl hesitated. He adjusted his glasses. He shuffled a stack of papers. "It is complicated," he said. "How complicated?" I asked. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "This is a copy of the last will and testament. It is the version your father signed 4 years ago." I opened the envelope. The document was heavy, bound in blue paper. I scanned the first few pages. Standard legalese, executor appointments, beneficiary designations. But as I flipped to the back, I noticed something. "Where are the schedules?" I asked. Daryl flinched. "The will references Schedule A for personal property and Schedule B for the trust distribution." I said, tapping the page. "These pages are missing." "They aren't missing." "Exactly," Daryl said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "They were withheld." "Withheld by whom?" I asked. "By the terms of the estate." he said. "It is highly unusual. Samantha, your father made some changes in the last 6 months. Significant changes to the structure of the assets. He created a new trust vehicle, the Rivera Legacy Trust, and the schedules detailing the assets within that trust were not provided to my office. Daryl said he wouldn't meet my eyes. He said they would be delivered by the trustee at the appropriate time." "Who is the trustee?" I asked. Daryl looked at his hands. "Gideon Price." I frowned. I didn't know the name. "Is he local?" "No," Daryl said. "He is out of D.C., a specialist in high conflict resolution and asset protection. I have reached out to him. I haven't heard back." I sat back in the chair. My father hired a stranger to manage his estate and hid the asset list from his own lawyer. That didn't sound like the Edmund Rivera I knew. He was a control freak. Yes, but he was transparent about his control. He wanted you to know he owned you. "There is something else," Daryl said. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Veronica has already filed." "Filed what?" "A petition in probate court," he said, "this morning, before the body was even in the ground. She is challenging any distribution to you. She is claiming undue influence." "Undue influence?" I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. I haven't lived in that house in 10 years. I saw him twice a year for holidays. How could I possibly influence him? "It doesn't matter if it is true." Daryl said, "It matters that she filed. It freezes everything. And she has hired a firm. North Star Narrative Group." I went cold. I knew North Star. They weren't a law firm. They were a reputation management agency. They were the people you hired when a CEO got caught embezzling or a politician was found in a hotel room with someone who wasn't their spouse. They didn't fight in court. They fought in the press. They destroyed people. "She is going to ruin the family name to save it." I said, "She is going to ruin you," Daryl said softly. "Samantha, she is telling people you manipulated your father in his final months. She is saying you forced him to sign checks. She is saying you are mentally unstable." I stared at the mahogany table, watching my own reflection in the polished wood. The Leech accusation wasn't an outburst. It was a talking point. It was the first shot in a war I didn't know I was fighting. "I need to see the financials," I said, "for Blue Heron and the foundation." Daryl sighed and pushed another stack of folders toward me. "It is a mess, Samantha." I spent the next hour poring over the documents. My father's estate included a controlling interest in Blue Heron Freight Works, the logistics company he built from one truck into a regional empire. It also held the assets of the Edmund Rivera Renewal Fund, a charitable entity that funded local parks and scholarships. The numbers were wrong. I am not an accountant, but I know how to read a balance sheet. The foundation's ledger showed massive outflows in the last 2 years. Consulting fees, strategic planning, vendor retainers. The money was bleeding out, hundreds of thousands of dollars, going to companies I had never heard of. And Blue Heron wasn't much better. The profit margins were down, but the operating expenses were sky high. "Where is this money going?" I asked, pointing to a line item for $200,000 paid to a firm called Marrowgate Strategies. "I don't know," Daryl said. "Veronica has been acting as the liaison for the foundation for the last 2 years. Your father." He stepped back. He was tired. He let her handle the day-to-day. I closed the folder. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about theft. Veronica accused me of being a leech because she was the one sucking the blood. She was projecting. I stood up. "I'm going to the house, Samantha." "Wait," Daryl said. I didn't wait. I walked out into the rain. The Rivera estate sat on a hill overlooking the town, a sprawling Victorian mansion with a wraparound porch and manicured hedges. It was the house I grew up in, the house where I learned to be quiet, the house where I learned that love was a transaction. I drove up the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires. I pulled up to the front door and killed the engine. The house was dark, except for a single light in the study window. I walked up the steps and inserted my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. I tried to pull the door, thinking it might be stuck. It held fast. I stepped back and looked at the lock. It was new. Shiny brass, unscratched. The locks had been changed. My father had been dead for less than 24 hours. "Excuse me, ma'am." I spun around. A security guard was standing by the garage. He was wearing a uniform I didn't recognize. "You can't be here," he said. "Private property. I am Samantha Rivera." I said, "This is my father's house. I have a list." "Ma'am," he said. He didn't look aggressive. "Just bored. Your name isn't on it." Ms. Veronica Rivera gave specific instructions. No access for anyone without her written consent. I looked at the house again. I thought about the files in the study, the personal papers, the checkbooks. Veronica had secured the perimeter. She was in there right now, or had been. Shredding, hiding, rewriting history. I could call the police. I could make a scene. I could smash a window. But that was what she wanted. She wanted the crazy sister. She wanted the unstable, greedy Leech screaming on the front lawn while the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. I lowered my hand. "I am leaving," I said. I drove to the Briar Glen Inn, a 2-story motel on the highway near the interstate. It was the kind of place where truckers slept for 4 hours and the coffee in the lobby tasted like burnt rubber. I paid cash for a room on the 2nd floor. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and lemon pledge. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap mattress sagging under my weight. I was 33 years old. I had a master's degree. I ran a successful program for at-risk youth. I paid my taxes, and I was sitting in a roadside motel in my hometown because my sister had stolen my home. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion. It wasn't just the grief, it was the familiarity of it all. I had spent my entire childhood being the backup daughter, and Veronica was the star, the beautiful one, the one who demanded attention. I was the one who did the homework. I was the one who remembered birthdays. I was the one who made sure the insurance didn't lapse. And in the end, none of it mattered. Being responsible didn't get you the inheritance. Being responsible just made you invisible. I lay back on the bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. I replayed the scene at the funeral. "You are a leech." I wouldn't beg. That was the one thing I decided in that dark, smelly room. I would not beg for dignity. I would not beg for what was mine. If she wanted a fight, she would get a fight. But I wouldn't fight like her. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't perform. I would wait. The next morning, the rain had stopped, replaced by a humid, heavy heat. I put on my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer and trousers, and drove to the county courthouse. There was a preliminary hearing for the probate filing. I didn't have a lawyer yet. Daryl had recused himself from representing me due to conflict of interest, so I went alone. I sat in the back row. Veronica wasn't there. Her lawyer was. He was a sleek man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He spoke smoothly about preserving the assets and protecting the estate from dissipation. He painted a picture of a family in crisis, of a younger sister who was erratic and desperate for cash. The judge, a tired-looking man named Henderson, granted a temporary freeze on all distributions. It was over in 10 minutes. I had lost before I even opened my mouth. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I felt small. The legal system was a machine, and I was just raw material to be ground up. "Ms. Rivera?" I stopped near the exit. A woman was standing by the water fountain. She was small, nervous-looking, clutching a worn leather handbag. She wore a cardigan that was 2 sizes too big. "Yes?" I said. "I am Marceline Holt," she said. "Marcy, I didn't recognize the name. Should I know you?" "I used to work for the foundation," she said. "I was the bookkeeper. Until 3 months ago." I stiffened. "Why are you talking to me?" Marcy looked around, as if expecting to be tackled by security. "I heard about what happened, at the funeral, and the filing." "And?" She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "Your father knew this was going to happen." "What do you mean?" "He knew Veronica would try to take it all," she said. "He knew about the invoices. He knew about North Star." My heart hammered against my ribs. If he knew, why didn't he stop her? "He was collecting," Marcy said. "He was building a case. He told me that if anything happened to him, and if the shouting started, I should find you. The shouting has definitely started. I said. Marcy reached into her bag. She pulled out a small, velvet box. It was a watch box. I recognized it immediately. It was the box for his Patek Philippe, the vintage one he wore every day. He gave this to me the day he fired me. Marcy said. He fired you? He had to. She said. To make it look real. He said. Give this to Samantha when she is standing on the outside looking in. I took the box. It felt heavy in my hand. What is in it? I asked. I don't know. She said. I never opened it. Marcy looked at the door. I have to go. I don't want to be seen with you. Not yet. Wait, I said. Will you testify? About the invoices? She looked terrified. I don't know. They are powerful people. Ms. Rivera. But your father was good to me. Eventually, she turned and hurried away, disappearing into the crowd of lawyers and clerks. I walked out of the courthouse and sat on a bench in the square. The sun was breaking through the clouds. I looked at the velvet box in my lap. My father's watch box. I opened it. Inside, resting on the cream-colored satin, was the watch. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Gold and leather, the face intricate with dials and complications. It was still ticking. Tucked underneath the watch was a small, heavy cream envelope. My name was written on the front in my father's distinct, jagged handwriting. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single index card. No letter, no I love you, no explanation. Just a date, a time, and 3 words. October 14th, 2 p.m. Trust the trustee. I stared at the card. October 14th was 3 weeks away. Who was the trustee? Gideon Price, the man who wouldn't return calls, the man Darrell Klein was afraid of. I looked at the watch. The second hand swept smoothly around the dial. I checked it against the clock on the courthouse tower. The watch was fast. Exactly 4 minutes fast. My father was a man of precision. He never let a watch run fast. He synchronized his timepieces with the atomic clock. If this watch was fast, he made it fast. I looked at the date on the card again. I looked at the watch. I looked at the courthouse where my sister had just legally frozen my life. Trust the trustee. It felt like a dare. It felt like a trap. But as I ran my thumb over the gold bezel of the watch, I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. My father hadn't left me a fortune. He hadn't left me a hug. He had left me a game. And for the first time since I got the call that he was dead, I knew exactly what to do. I wasn't going to fight Veronica for the scrap she was trying to steal. I was going to wait for the clock to run out. I snapped the box shut, put it in my purse, and stood up. The grief was still there, heavy and dull, but the numbness was gone. I had a date, I had a time, and I had a secret. Game on. Veronica. I walked to my car. The sound of my heels distinct and steady on the pavement. I didn't look like a Leech anymore. I looked like a woman with a plan. And for a Rivera, that was far more dangerous. I needed a lawyer who wasn't afraid of the country club set. Darrell Klein was a good man, but he was a golden retriever in a room full of vipers. He wanted everyone to get along. I needed someone who understood that peace was no longer an option. I found Iris Weller in a converted brick row house on the edge of the historic district, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a bakery. Her office didn't smell like mahogany and old money. It smelled of coffee and printer toner. Iris herself was a woman in her late 50s with short, steel-gray hair and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She didn't offer me tea. She offered me a seat and a legal pad. "You are the sister," Iris said. It wasn't a question. She was reading the file I had brought, her eyes scanning the pages with terrifying speed. "I am the sister," I said. "And you are the Leech," she added, looking up over the rim of her glasses. I flinched. The word still felt like a physical blow. "That is what the filing says," Iris said, tapping the paper. "Undue influence, parasitic relationship, financial elder abuse. They are throwing the entire dictionary at you. Ms. Rivera." "It is not true," I said. "I don't care if it is true," Iris said flatly. "I care if they can prove it, and right now, They don't have to prove it. They just have to say it loud enough that you get scared and go away. She leaned back in her chair, the springs squeaking. Listen to me closely. Veronica Rivera has hired North Star Narrative Group. They are not lawyers. They are storytellers. They are going to write a story where you are the villain and she is the grieving. Protective air. If you try to fight them on the drama, you will lose. You can't outscream a megaphone. So what do? I asked. We focus on the documents, Iris said. We ignore the noise. We ignore the insults. We look at the math. Math doesn't have an opinion. Math doesn't lie. If there is theft, it is in the ledgers. She extended a hand across the messy desk. I am Iris Weller. I charge $300 an hour, and I don't do emotional hand-holding, but I am very good at finding missing money. I took her hand. Her grip was firm, dry, and calloused. I am Samantha Rivera, I said, and I don't need a hand-holder. I need a shovel. Good, Iris said, because we are going to have to dig through a lot of dirt. The dirt started flying 3 days later. It began with a Facebook post. Veronica didn't name me. Of course, that would be too direct. Instead, she posted a black and white photo of herself and our father from 20 years ago. Looking happy on a sailboat, the caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive vague booking, heartbroken. Not just by the loss, but by the betrayal of those who only saw him as a bank account. Protecting his legacy is the hardest thing I have ever done, but I will not let his kindness be exploited any longer. It had 400 likes in an hour. Then came the comments. So brave, V. Family can be the worst. We know who you mean. Stay strong. I sat at my desk at the nonprofit foundation in DHC, where I worked as a grant administrator, staring at the screen. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. Hey, just saw V's post. Is everything okay? Hearing some crazy rumors? I put the phone face down. By the afternoon, the whispers had breached the walls of my office. I walked into the break room to get coffee, and the conversation died instantly. 2 of the junior program officers were standing by the sink. They looked at me, then looked away, suddenly intensely interested in the expiration date on a carton of milk. Samantha, my boss, David, said, appearing in the doorway, "Can I have a quick word?" I followed him into his office. David was a kind man, a career philanthropist who wore corduroy jackets and believed in the goodness of humanity. He looked uncomfortable. "I got a call today," David said, closing the door, "from a donor." "Oh?" I said. My stomach tightened. They were asking about pending litigation, David said. He chose his words carefully. They heard there was a dispute regarding your father's estate, allegations of financial impropriety. I felt the blood drain from my face. It is a family dispute. David, it has nothing to do with my work here. I know that, David said gently. And you know that. But we are a 501c3. We survive on trust. If there is a public perception that one of our senior administrators is involved in elder abuse, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I am not asking you to leave. Samantha, David said, but maybe it would be best if you took some personal time. Until this blows over, to handle your family affairs. He was benching me. Veronica had managed to reach across the state line and touch my livelihood without ever lifting a finger. She hadn't sued me. She hadn't filed a complaint. She had just whispered, and the world had flinched. I understand, I said, my voice wooden. I will work remotely for a few weeks. I packed my bag and walked out of the building. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I felt like I was carrying a contagion. I was the Leech. The label was sticking. That night, I sat in the dim light of the motel room, surrounded by takeout containers and legal files. Iris had been busy. She had sent a formal demand letter to Gideon Price, the trustee named in the will. We requested a full accounting of the estate, the trust schedules, and an inventory of assets, by law, as a beneficiary. I was entitled to this information. I opened my laptop to check my email. There was a reply from Price's office. It wasn't a PDF. It wasn't a letterhead. It was a single line of text in the body of an email. Sent from a generic admin account. We do not comment on pending matters. That was it. No. Dear Miss Rivera. No, we are processing your request. Just a stone wall. I called Iris. He is stonewalling, Iris said. Her voice sounded tinny over the speakerphone. Can he do that? I asked. No, Iris said. He can't. He has a fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries, but he is betting that we won't have the money or the time to force him. He is stalling. Why? I asked. Because there is something in those schedules he doesn't want us to see yet, Iris said. Or because he hasn't done the work. Or because he's working for your sister. Is there any good news? I asked. I am digging into the property records, Iris said. But Samantha, you need to find out what is happening on the ground. I can fight the paper war. But you need to find the bodies. I hung up. The bodies. I looked at the watch box on the nightstand. Trust the trustee. The note felt like a mockery now. Trust the man who wouldn't return my emails? Trust the man who was letting my sister destroy my reputation? I grabbed my coat. I couldn't sit in the room anymore. I needed to move. I drove to a diner on the outskirts of Briar Glen, a place called the Silver Spoon. It was late, and the place was mostly empty, save for a few truckers and a group of teenagers in a booth. I took a seat in the back corner and ordered a black coffee. 10 minutes later, the bell above the door chimed. Marceline Holt walked in. She looked even more nervous than she had at the courthouse. She was wearing a raincoat buttoned up to her chin, and she kept checking the parking lot as if she expected a black van to pull up. Thank you for coming, I said as she slid into the booth opposite me. I shouldn't be here, Marcy said. If they find out I'm talking to you. Who is they? I asked. North Star, she said. And Veronica. Tell me about the invoices. Marcy? I said, keeping my voice low. You said you saw things. Marcy wrapped her hands around the mug of tea the waitress placed in front of her. She stared into the dark liquid. It started about 18 months ago. She said, Your father was traveling a lot. Veronica was coming into the office more. She said she was helping him with the modernization of the foundation. And then the bills started coming. Marcy said, North Star Narrative Group, Marrowgate Strategies, consulting fees, $50,000 here, $80,000 there. For what? I asked. That is just it, Marcy said. The descriptions were vague. Strategic alignment, legacy preservation, but the foundation doesn't do PR. We give grants to libraries and parks. We don't need reputation management. Did you ask my father about it? I tried. Marcy said, I showed him a stack of checks one afternoon. He looked at them, and he got very quiet. He didn't get angry. He just went still. What did he say? He said, Let them cash it. I frowned. He let them steal from him? He said, It is the cost of tuition. That is exactly what he said. Tuition. I felt a chill. My father taught lessons. Sometimes those lessons were expensive. Then he fired me. Marcy said. A week later, he called me in and said he was restructuring and my position was redundant. He gave me 6 months of severance and the watch box. He told me to wait for you. He knew, I whispered. He watched Veronica steal from the charity, and he let her do it. Why? Marcy asked. Why would he do that? Because he was building a trap. I said. Marcy looked at me. What kind of trap? The kind that snaps shut when you think you have won. I said. Marcy reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a ledger page. I made this before I left, she said, sliding it across the table. I know I signed an NDA, but I couldn't let them think I was the one who messed up the books. I looked at the page. It was a list of wire transfers. The recipient was an LLC called Blue Jay Holdings. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. Who is Blue Jay Holdings? I asked. I don't know, Marcy said. But every time a check went to North Star, a smaller check went to Blue Jay, 5%, every single time, kickbacks. I said, or a split. Marcy said. I looked at the date on the last transfer. It was 3 days before my father died. Marcy, you need to keep this safe. I said, I am scared. Ms. Rivera, she said, Veronica has security now, not just the regular guards, these men in suits. They sit in the lobby of the foundation building. They ask for ID, even if they know you. I reached across the table and touched her hand. You are brave. Marcy, you are doing the right thing. She pulled her hand away and stood up. I have to go. Please don't tell them you saw me. She hurried out of the diner, leaving me with the photocopy and a cold cup of coffee. The next morning, I decided to test the fences. I drove to the foundation headquarters, a sleek glass building downtown. I was a board member. Technically, my father had appointed me 5 years ago. Though I had rarely attended meetings in person, I had never resigned. I walked up to the reception desk. The security guard was new. He was built like a linebacker, wearing a suit that was too tight across the shoulders. Can I help you, ma'am? He asked. He didn't smile. I am Samantha Rivera. I said, I am here for the board meeting. He looked down at a clipboard. I don't have you on the list. Ms. Rivera. I am on the board. I said, I don't need to be on a visitor list. The board is currently in executive session. He said, no unauthorized personnel. I am not unauthorized personnel. I said, my voice rising slightly. I am a voting member of this foundation. The guard stepped out from behind the desk. He blocked my path to the elevators. His physical presence was intimidating, a wall of muscle and indifference. Ms. Veronica Rivera is the acting chair, he said. She has issued a directive. Until the probate matters are resolved, all non-executive board access is suspended. Suspended? I said. You can't suspend a board member without a vote. I am just following orders. Ma'am, he said, please leave the premises, or I will have to escort you out. I looked past him, through the glass walls of the conference room down the hall. I could see them, the board members, people I had known for years, old men in gray suits. They were looking at me. One of them, Mr. Henderson, met my eyes for a second, then quickly looked down at his papers. They were afraid. Veronica had cowed them all. I turned and walked out. I drove to Blue Heron Freight Works next. It was the same story. My badge didn't work at the turnstile. The receptionist, a woman named Linda who had sent me Christmas cards for a decade, pretended to be on the phone when I walked in. I stood in the lobby, watching the executives walk by on the mezzanine level. I saw the CFO, a man named Marcus. He saw me. He paused, his hand on the railing, and for a moment, I thought he was going to come down. Then he saw the security guard moving toward me, and he turned his back and walked away. I was a ghost. I was invisible. Veronica had successfully erased me from the company my father built. I went back to the motel and called Iris. They locked me out. I said, everywhere. That is what I expected. Iris said, but I found something. Samantha, what? I pulled the land records. Iris said, your father refinanced the commercial depot in Baltimore 3 months ago. The depot? I said. That building is free and clear. He paid off the mortgage in the 90s. He hated debt. He used to give speeches about it. Interest is the devil's tax, he would say. Well, he took out a $5 million loan against it. Iris said, cash out. $5 million? I asked. Stunned. Where did the money go? That is the question. Iris said, it didn't go into the Blue Heron operating account. It didn't go into the foundation. It went into the Rivera Legacy Trust, the trust with the missing schedules. I said, exactly, Iris said. He liquidated equity and moved the cash into a black box. And since we can't see inside the box, we don't know who has access to it, or if it is still there. I said, or if Veronica has already spent it. Iris said, Samantha, this is getting dangerous. $5 million is enough money to make people do irrational things. I hung up the phone. I felt a headache forming behind my eyes. My father, the man who pinched pennies on office supplies, had leveraged a prime asset for cash right before he died. Why? To pay the tuition? My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Samantha. It is Lyle Sterling. I recognized the voice. He was Veronica's lawyer, the silver-haired shark from the hearing. Mr. Sterling. I said, to what do I owe the pleasure? I have a proposal for you. Samantha, he said. His voice was smooth, like warm syrup. Veronica wants to end this. She is distressed by the conflict. She wants to offer you an olive branch. An olive branch? I said. She called me a leech in front of 300 people. Emotions run high in grief. Lyle said, we would like to meet, tomorrow morning, my office, to discuss a settlement. I paused. A settlement meant they were worried, or it meant they wanted me gone before I found the missing $5 million. I will be there, I said, with my attorney. Lyle Sterling's office was the opposite of Iris's. It was on the top floor of the tallest building in the county. The conference room had a view of the entire valley. The table was glass. The water was imported. Veronica was sitting at the far end of the table. She didn't stand up when I walked in. She was wearing a white suit, looking like a martyr. Iris sat next to me. She placed her legal pad on the glass table with a deliberate thud. Let us keep this brief, Lyle said, opening a folder. Veronica is prepared to be generous. She understands that your financial situation is precarious. Samantha, my financial situation is fine. I said. Lyle smiled, a condescending twitch of his lips. We are offering you a one-time cash payment of $250,000. I stared at him. The estate was worth tens of millions. The depot refinance alone was $5 million. In exchange for what? Iris asked. In exchange for a full renunciation of any claims against the estate, the foundation, or the trusts, Lyle said, and a non-disclosure agreement, and he slid a piece of paper across the table, a public statement. I picked up the paper. It was a typed letter. I, Samantha Rivera, acknowledge that my recent behavior was driven by grief and misunderstanding. I apologize to my sister and the memory of my father for the disruption I have caused. I withdraw all challenges and support Veronica's leadership of the family legacy. I read it twice. It wasn't just a surrender. It was a humiliation. It was a confession to crimes I hadn't committed. This is a joke, Iris said. It is mercy, Veronica said. She spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, sad. Samantha, look at yourself. You are staying in a motel. You have no job. Your reputation is in tatters. I am trying to save you. Save me? I said. You are the one destroying me. I am protecting the family. Veronica said, you were never built for this. Sam, you are soft. You are the backup. You always were. Take the money. Go back to your little apartment. Start over. Before you get hurt. Is that a threat? Iris asked sharply. It is reality, Veronica said. She looked at me, her eyes drilling into mine. There is nothing for you here. Dad didn't leave you anything because he knew you couldn't handle it. He knew you would just waste it, or let someone take it from you. I felt the anger rising, hot and fast. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the water pitcher at her perfect white suit. I wanted to tell her about the heating bills I paid. I wanted to tell her about the watch box. But I remembered the watch. Trust the trustee. If I signed this, the game was over. If I took the money, I admitted I was the leech. I took a deep breath. I folded the paper in half, then in half again, then in half again. No, I said. Veronica's face hardened. $250,000. Samantha, it is more than you make in 3 years. I don't care. I said, you are going to lose. She said, you are going to end up with nothing, and everyone will know you for what you are. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but my voice was steady. I would rather have nothing than be a liar. Veronica, and I am not going to sign a lie so you can sleep better at night. I turned to Lyle. We are done here. Samantha! Veronica shouted as I reached the door. The mask slipped. Her face was twisted. Ugly. You are going to regret this. You are going to burn. I walked out. Iris followed me. We rode the elevator down in silence. When we reached the lobby, I leaned against the wall. My knees gave out. I slid down until I was crouching on the cold marble floor. I was shaking, uncontrollable. violent shivers. "Samantha?" Iris said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You did good." "I didn't do good," I whispered. "I just turned down $250,000 to fight a war I can't win." "You can win," Iris said. "We just need to find the schedules." I closed my eyes. It wasn't about the schedules anymore. It wasn't about the money. Veronica wanted me to say I was the Leech. She wanted me to agree to her version of the story, the version where she was the hero and I was the failure. I stood up, using the wall for support. I brushed off my suit. "I am not a Leech," I said. "No," Iris said. "You are a Rivera." I checked my watch, the cheap plastic one I wore because my good one was in the box. It was September 25th, 2 weeks until October 14th. "Let her scream," I said. "I am waiting for the bell." The paper war began on a Tuesday morning. In a courtroom that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, Iris Weller did not look like a warrior. She looked like a librarian who had simply run out of patience. She stood before Judge Henderson, her gray cardigan buttoned wrong, holding a stack of motions that were thick enough to stop a bullet. We were filing to compel the production of the trust schedules and requesting the appointment of a neutral forensic accountant to audit the estate. "This is a fishing expedition, Your Honor," Lyle Sterling said. He stood at the other table, looking effortless in a navy suit that probably cost more than Iris's entire office lease. "Ms. Rivera is upset that her father did not leave her the windfall she expected. She is using this court to harass her sister and delay the proper administration of the estate." Iris didn't even look at him. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Iris said, her voice flat and bored. "The decedent died 3 weeks ago. The will references schedules that have not been produced. The trustee has not responded to 3 formal requests for information. My client is a beneficiary. She has a statutory right to know what is in the trust. If there is nothing to hide, then production should take 5 minutes. If there is something to hide, then we need a forensic accountant yesterday." The judge rubbed his temples. He looked at Veronica, who was sitting behind Lyle, looking pale and tragically beautiful. Then he looked at me. I sat with my back straight, hands folded in my lap, trying to look like the reasonable one. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "produce the schedules. You have 10 days. But the trustee—" Lyle started. 10 days, the judge repeated. "And I'm taking the request for a forensic accountant under advisement. If the schedules are incomplete, I will grant it." It was a win. A small, technical win. But as we walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel victorious. I felt the weight of the clock. 10 days was a long time for Veronica to hide money. 10 days was a long time for North Star Narrative Group to destroy my life. I needed to find the leak. The numbers in the foundation ledgers didn't make sense. But numbers on a page are dry. I needed a human voice. I needed someone who had seen the money move. I spent 2 days digging through LinkedIn and old company newsletters, cross-referencing names with the timeline of my father's modernization of Blue Heron Freight Works. I found a name: Owen Lasky, former operations manager. He had left the company 6 months ago. No announcement, no retirement party, just gone. I tracked him down to a small engine repair shop 3 towns over. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. He was wearing grease-stained coveralls, wiping his hands on a rag as he watched me walk up the driveway. "Owen Lasky?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You are Edmund's daughter. The other one. I am Samantha." I said, "I have nothing to say to you people," he said, turning back to the lawnmower on his workbench. "I signed the NDA. I took the severance. I am done. I am not here for the company." "Owen," I said, "I am here because my father is dead, and because my sister is trying to steal everything he built." Owen stopped wiping his hands. He looked at the ground, then at the sky. He looked like a man who was carrying a heavy rock and was desperate to put it down. He was a good man. Owen said quietly, "Your dad, he was hard, but he was fair. He didn't know about the theft." "Did he?" I asked. "Not at first." Owen laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "Theft? That is a strong word. In the corporate world, we call it inefficiency." "Tell me how they did it," I said, Owen threw the rag onto the bench. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. It was the vendor contracts. You know the board has to approve any expense over $5,000, right? That is the rule. I nodded. So they didn't spend $5,000. Owen said, they spent $4,999, over and over again, structuring. I said, death by 1,000 cuts. Owen said, we would get invoices for logistics consulting or fleet optimization. Small amounts, just under the radar. They were paid out to shell companies. I tried to flag it. I went to the CFO. Marcus? I asked. Yeah, Marcus. Owen said. He told me it was handled. He told me it was part of a confidential strategic review. And then, a week later, I was called into HR and told my position was being eliminated. Did my father know? Owen hesitated. He came down to the floor about a month before I left. He didn't say anything to me, but he was walking the warehouse, checking the manifests against the invoices. He had a clipboard. He looked grim. He was investigating. I said, he was hunting. Owen corrected. He stopped by my desk on his way out. He didn't look at me. He just said, keep your head down. Owen, the storm is coming. I felt a shiver go down my spine. My father knew. He had been watching his own company bleed, watching his own daughter siphon off the profits. And he hadn't fired her. He had let her do it. Why? The question kept circling in my mind. Why let the wound fester? Thank you. Owen. I said. He picked up a wrench. Watch your back. Ms. Rivera, these aren't just greedy people. They are desperate people. And desperate people bite. I didn't have time to process Owen's warning. The bite came the next morning. I was sitting in the motel room, drinking lukewarm coffee. When my phone buzzed, it was a Google alert I had set up for my own name. I clicked the link. It was a gossip blog, one of those sites that pretends to be news but is really just a sewer for character assassination. The headline read, The Greedy Sister, Inside the Rivera Estate War. Below the headline was a photo. It was me, taken outside the courthouse yesterday. I looked terrible. My hair was windblown. My expression was twisted in frustration as I listened to Iris. The angle made me look aggressive, unhinged. The caption read, Samantha Rivera, estranged daughter of the late tycoon Edmund Rivera, seen arguing with her legal team as she attempts to block her sister from managing their father's charitable foundation. Sources say Samantha, who has struggled financially for years, is demanding a payout in the millions. I scrolled down. The article was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed I had harassed my father for money on his deathbed. It claimed I was jealous of Veronica's success. It quoted anonymous friends of the family who said I had always been unstable. It was North Star. It had their fingerprints all over it. They were painting a narrative where I wasn't just a leech. I was a villain. My phone rang. It was David, my boss at the nonprofit. Samantha, he said. His voice was tight. You saw it. I said, board members saw it. David said, we have donors calling. Samantha, they are asking why we have a grant administrator who is being accused of elder abuse in the press. It is a lie. David, I said, I am the one fighting the abuse. Perception is reality. Samantha, David said, you know that. In our world, the accusation is the verdict. He paused. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. I think it would be best if you took a leave of absence, David said, indefinite. Until this is resolved, you are firing me. I said, I am protecting the organization. He said, I am sorry. Samantha, truly, but I can't have this distraction. I hung up the phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the device still warm in my hand. I had lost my job. I had lost my reputation. I was living in a motel. I walked to the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself. The dark circles under my eyes were darker. My skin was pale. I looked like the woman in the photo. I looked like the person they said I was. Maybe I should stop. A voice whispered in my head. Maybe I should take the $250,000. Maybe I should sign the paper and disappear. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch card. Trust the trustee. I looked at the date. October 14th. It was still 10 days away. My father had planned this. He knew they would come for me. He knew they would strip me down. Instructions for when the shouting starts. I wasn't done shouting. I needed to understand the trap. If my father knew about the theft. And he knew Veronica would attack me. He must have built a mechanism to stop it. A dead man's switch. I went back to the paperwork Marcy had given me. Among the photocopied ledgers, there was an email thread my father had printed out. It was correspondence with a woman named Dr. Celine Park. The subject line was, Compliance Architecture/Trigger Events. I searched for her. Dr. Celine Park was a former forensic auditor who now ran a boutique consultancy specializing in trust governance and ethical compliance. Her office was in a glass tower in Bethesda. I didn't call. I just showed up. Her receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked past the desk and knocked on the frosted glass door of her inner office. Come in, a cool voice said. I opened the door. Doctor. Celine Park was sitting behind a pristine white desk. She was sharp-featured, elegant, wearing glasses with thick black frames. She didn't look surprised to see me. Ms. Rivera, she said, I wondered if you would come. You know who I am? I asked. I make it my business to know the players. She said, Please, sit down. I sat. I placed the watch card on the desk between us. My father told me to trust the trustee. I said, But the trustee won't talk to me. And my sister is burning my life to the ground. I need to know what you built for him. Celine looked at the card. She didn't touch it. She just stared at the 3 words. Your father was a very specific man. Celine said, He came to me a year ago. He said he had a problem. He said he had a fox in the henhouse. Veronica. I said, He didn't use names. Celine said, He just said that he needed a system that would reveal the truth. But only if the fox tried to eat the chickens. A tripwire. I said, Exactly. Celine said. She leaned forward. We designed a conditional disclosure protocol. It is tied to the governance of the Rivera Legacy Trust. In English. Please. I said, The trust has 2 states. Celine explained, dormant and active. In the dormant state, the assets are shielded, and the schedules are sealed. This is to protect the family privacy, but if certain trigger events occur, the trust switches to active. What are the triggers? I asked. There are 3, Celine said. First, a legal challenge to the beneficiary distribution. Second, a public accusation of misconduct against a beneficiary. And third, an attempt to coerce a beneficiary into renunciation. They have done all 3, I said. I know, Celine said. And because they have done all 3, the protocol has been activated. So why hasn't Gideon Price said anything? I asked. Why is he letting me drown? Because the protocol requires the trap to be fully sprung. Celine said, If Price speaks too soon, Veronica can withdraw her petition. She can claim it was a misunderstanding. She can settle, and then she stays in control of the foundation. She stays in control of the legacy. My father wants her to commit. I realized. He wants her on the record. He wants her under oath. Celine said, The disclosure is timed to occur during a judicial evidentiary hearing, when the lies are sworn to, when there is no going back. October 14th. I said, The hearing date. Celine nodded. That is when the sealed exhibits will be opened. What is in the exhibits? I asked. The truth, Celine said. The evidence of the structuring, the invoices, the proof that the liquidity from the refinance didn't vanish. It was moved to safety. And one more thing. What? A change in the governance structure. Celine said, If the triggers are met, the control of the trust does not go to the survivor. It goes to a neutral board, and the family members are removed. Both of us? I asked. Both of you. Celine said, Your father didn't want to choose a winner. Samantha, he wanted to excise the cancer. If you fight, you lose control. If Veronica fights, she loses control. But I am not the cancer. I said, No, Celine said softly. You are the bait. I sat back in the chair. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My father hadn't left me a fortune to enjoy. He had used me as a lure to draw Veronica out into the open. He knew she couldn't resist destroying me. He knew her greed and her hatred were stronger than her caution. He sacrificed me. I whispered. He let her destroy my reputation, my job, my peace, just to catch her. He trusted you, Celine said. He trusted that you were strong enough to take the hit. He trusted that you would stand there and let her scream, and that you wouldn't break. I looked at the card again. Trust the trustee. He didn't trust me to be happy. He trusted me to be durable. Thank you. Doctor. Park. I said. I stood up. I felt cold, but I also felt clear. I knew the rules of the game now. I wasn't fighting for inheritance anymore. I was fighting for the kill. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. I needed to know why Veronica was so desperate. Greed was one thing, but the structuring, the frantic refinance, the risk she was taking, it smelled like panic. I cornered Daryl Klein that evening. I waited for him in the parking garage under his office building. Samantha, he said, jumping when I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, you scared me. We need to talk. Daryl, I said. I can't, he said, clutching his briefcase. I am conflicted out. You have Ms. Weller. Iris is handling the law. I said, I am asking you about the man. You knew my father for 40 years. You knew what he was doing. Daryl looked around the empty garage. He looked old. The tension of the last few weeks had etched deep lines into his face. He was heartbroken. Samantha, Daryl said, that is what you need to know. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken. About Veronica? About the betrayal. Daryl said, he found the debt. What debt? Veronica's debt. Daryl whispered, she was leveraged. Samantha, personally, she had borrowed heavily to fund that lifestyle of hers. The brand, the travel, the image. She was underwater, 7 figures underwater, and she was using the foundation to pay it off. I said, she was borrowing against her future inheritance. Daryl said, I rolled up the metal door. The air inside was stale and hot. It smelled of dust and cardboard. The unit was mostly empty, just a few banker's boxes stacked on a metal shelf. I walked over to them. They were labeled in black marker. Events 2020. Donors 2021. Speeches, and one box, on the bottom shelf, marked only with 3 letters. VER. I pulled the box down. It was heavy. I sat on the concrete floor and opened the lid. It was a dossier. My father had been building a case against his own daughter. There were printouts of wire transfers. There were copies of the split invoices Owen had told me about. There were emails from North Star Narrative Group discussing optics and suppression strategies. And there were photos. Photos of Veronica meeting with men I didn't recognize. Men who looked like they broke knees for a living. The unsavory lenders Daryl had mentioned. My father had tracked it all. He had documented every dollar she stole, every lie she told. At the bottom of the box, I found a single sheet of yellow legal paper. It was a note, written in his jagged hand. Not cruelty, consequences. That was it. 3 words. I sat there in the dust, holding the note. Not cruelty, consequences. He could have stopped her. He could have intervened, paid off her debts, sent her to rehab, fired her. But he didn't. He let her dig the hole. He let her trap herself. And now, he was using me to kick the ladder away. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Rage at Veronica for her greed, rage at my father for his coldness, and a strange, twisted pity for my sister. She was drowning, and she was trying to climb on top of me to breathe. If I went through with this, if I let the hearing happen, Veronica would be destroyed, not just financially, legally. She could go to prison for this. The fraud was documented. The embezzlement was clear. Did I want that? Did I want to be the one who sent my sister to jail? I looked at the photo of me outside the courthouse. The greedy sister. She had tried to destroy me. She was still trying to destroy me. She had cost me my job. She had humiliated me. I picked up the watch. I wound it, feeling the resistance of the springs. It was a mechanical thing. It didn't have feelings. It just kept time. My father had set the time. He had wound the mechanism. All I had to do was wait for the alarm to ring. I put the note back in the box. I put the lid on. I wasn't going to use this evidence. Not yet. I didn't need to. The trustee had it. The court would see it. My job wasn't to prosecute Veronica. My job was to be the bait. My job was to stand in the center of the room and let her attack me. Knowing that every blow she landed was nailing her own coffin shut. It was cruel. It was cold. It was exactly what Edmund Rivera would have done. I stood up and brushed the dust off my pants. I checked the watch. It was 2 minutes fast. Just like my father liked it. Precision. I thought, precision is a form of self-protection. I walked out of the storage unit and rolled the door down. The metal slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. I was ready for court. The courtroom felt less like a place of law and more like a theater where the tickets had been oversold. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Veronica's team had been busy. There were reporters from the local paper, a blogger from D.C., and a scattering of Briar Glen's social elite, all wearing dark colors and expressions of performative concern. They were there to watch the grieving daughter defend her father's legacy against the prodigal sister. I sat at the defendant's table next to Iris Weller. My hands were folded on the polished wood, my knuckles white. I was wearing the same charcoal suit I had worn to the funeral. It was the armor I had chosen, and I wasn't going to change it now. Veronica was on the stand. She looked devastating. She wore a simple black dress that highlighted her pale skin, and she held a handkerchief in one hand, twisting it just enough to convey distress without looking hysterical. "It has been a nightmare," Veronica told the judge, her voice trembling perfectly on the last syllable. "My father built this estate from nothing. He believed in hard work. He believed in earning your way." Mr. Sterling, her lawyer, nodded sympathetically. "And how would you characterize your sister's relationship with your father in his final years?" Veronica turned her head. She looked directly at me. Her eyes were dry, clear, and venomous. Samantha was distant. Veronica said, "She only called when she needed something, usually money. Dad tried to help her. He paid her rent for years. He paid off her student loans, but it was never enough." "Objection," Iris said, not looking up from her notes. "Hearsay. Sustained," Judge Henderson said. "Stick to the facts, Ms. Rivera. The fact is," Veronica continued, ignoring the judge, "that Samantha views this family as a resource to be mined. She doesn't care about the foundation. She doesn't care about the employees at Blue Heron. She just wants a payout. She is a leech. Your Honor, she attaches herself to people who work, and she drains them." The word echoed in the room. Leech. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. I saw a woman in the second row, the wife of the bank president, lean over and whisper to her neighbor. They looked at me with disgust. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout about the heating bills, the grocery runs, the nights I spent sitting with my father in the hospital while Veronica was at a fashion week in Milan. But I stayed seated. I stayed silent. My silence was my strategy, but it was also my enemy, to the people in this room. My lack of outburst looked like guilt. It looked like I was sitting there taking my medicine because I knew I deserved it. "Your witness," Lyle Sterling said, looking pleased. Iris stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood by her chair, adjusting her glasses. "Ms. Rivera," Iris said, "you claim my client only called when she needed money. Do you have records of these calls?" Veronica sniffed. "I don't record my family's phone calls. We aren't spies. Do you have bank records showing these alleged payments for rent and student loans?" Iris asked. "Dad paid cash," Veronica said quickly. "He didn't want a paper trail. He was protecting her dignity." Iris picked up a piece of paper. "Interesting, because I have Ms. Rivera's tax returns and bank statements for the last 10 years. They show she has been fully employed and self-sufficient. There are no large cash deposits. In fact, there are several outgoing transfers to you." Veronica stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about. We can produce the receipts," Iris said. But let us move on. You are the acting chair of the Edmund Rivera Renewal Fund, correct? I am. And you have a fiduciary duty to manage those assets for the public good? Of course. Then can you explain why the foundation has paid $300,000 in the last 18 months to a firm called North Star Narrative Group? Veronica blinked. It was a micro-reaction, a tiny flicker of panic before the mask slammed back down. Consulting, she said. Strategic outreach. We are expanding our donor base. Iris held up another document. And can you explain why the schedules for the Rivera Legacy Trust, the trust that holds the bulk of the estate, are still missing? That is a question for the trustee. Veronica said. Gideon Price. We have asked Mr. Price? Iris said. He isn't answering. But you are in contact with him, aren't you? I have spoken to him briefly. Veronica said. Did you discuss the schedules? I don't recall. You don't recall discussing the missing list of $20 million in assets? Iris asked, her voice sharpening. I have a lot on my mind, Veronica snapped. My father just died. Why are you harassing me about paperwork when my sister is trying to steal the estate? She started to cry. Real tears this time, born of frustration and fear. Lyle Sterling jumped up. Your Honor, this is badgering. The witness is grieving. Judge Henderson looked at Veronica, then at Iris. Move on. Ms. Weller, we have nothing further for this witness, Iris said. We sat down. Veronica wiped her eyes and stepped down from the stand, casting a look of wounded martyrdom at the gallery. They ate it up, as we packed up our files. Lyle Sterling leaned over the aisle. You are fishing, Iris, he said quietly. You have nothing real. Just a few invoices and a bad attitude. Your client is going to get hurt. Iris didn't look at him. She just zipped up her briefcase. We will see. Lyle. We walked out of the courthouse into a wall of flashbulbs. The local press had been waiting. Ms. Rivera, is it true you are suing for a larger share? Ms. Rivera, do you have a comment on your sister's testimony? I kept my head down. Iris guided me through the crowd to her beat-up Honda Civic. We got in and locked the doors. They hate me, I said, watching the reporters through the window. They don't know you, Iris said. They are watching a play. Veronica is a very good actress. I said. Yes, Iris said, starting the engine. But actresses need scripts, and we are about to rewrite hers. That night, the motel Wi-Fi was struggling to load my email. I was sitting on the bed, eating a cold sandwich, feeling the exhaustion settle into my bones. The hearing had drained me. Being called a leech to my face, under oath, was different than hearing it at a funeral. It felt legal now. It felt permanent. My laptop pinged. A new email. The sender was Truthseeker88. No subject line. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment. A spreadsheet file named ERRF_vendor_analysis.xlsx. I downloaded it. It was a detailed breakdown of the foundation's spending for the last 2 years. Someone had gone through the general ledger and pulled out every single payment to a third-party consultant. The lines were color-coded, yellow for marketing, green for events, and red for Marrowgate strategies. I scrolled down the red section. The totals were staggering. $50,000 here, $75,000 there, all of them just under the board approval threshold, or split into multiple invoices on the same day. But there was a new column in this spreadsheet. Entity owner, next to Marrowgate Strategies. It listed a name, Julian Vane. I knew that name. Julian Vane was Veronica's ex-boyfriend from college, the one who had started a luxury branding agency that went bust in 2019. I Googled him. Julian Vane was currently listed as a senior partner at a firm in Delaware, a firm with no website and a P.O. box address. This was the smoking gun. Veronica wasn't just wasting money on bad PR. She was funneling it to her friends. She was laundering the inheritance before she even got it. I forwarded the email to Iris. Who sent this? I typed. 5 minutes later, Iris replied, Doesn't matter. It is admissible if we can verify the bank records, and I can verify them. I looked at the screen. Someone else was watching. Someone else knew. Was it Owen Lasky? Marcy Holt? Or was it the trustee, leaking information from behind his wall of silence? The next morning, I met Celine Park at a coffee shop in Bethesda. It was far enough from Briar Glen that we wouldn't be seen. Celine looked impeccable, as always. She ordered a green tea and didn't touch it. "I need a statement," I said. "A sworn affidavit." "Regarding what?" she asked. "Regarding the tripwire," I said. "I need you to go on the record that my father asked you to design a system to detect undue influence and intimidation." Celine adjusted her glasses. "That is highly irregular." "Samantha, my work is confidential. My father is dead," I said, "and his plan is working. But I am the one taking the beating. I need something to show the judge that this isn't just a family squabble. I need him to know that Edmund Rivera anticipated this exact scenario." Celine looked out the window. She watched the traffic on the busy street. "He told me you were tough," she said softly. "He told you that?" he said. "Samantha is the quiet one, but she is the one who holds the roof up." I felt a lump in my throat. He had never said that to me. "I will do it." Celine said, "I will draft an affidavit stating that the trust governance was structured to respond to hostile actions by a beneficiary. I won't name Veronica specifically, but I will describe the trigger conditions. That is all I need." I said. "There is one more thing," Celine said. "The disclosure. What about it?" "It is absolute," she said. "Once the trustee opens those exhibits, everything comes out, not just Veronica's theft, but your father's secrets too." "What secrets?" I asked. Celine looked at me with pity. "You think you know why he did this? Samantha, you think it was just to catch a thief, but there is more in those boxes than ledgers. Be sure you want to open them. I have nothing left to lose." I said, "They have already taken my job and my name. Then I will send the affidavit to your attorney by close of business." Celine said. She stood up, leaving the tea steaming on the table. Iris was waiting for me when I got back to her office. She looked excited, which for Iris meant she was tapping her pen on the desk slightly faster than usual. "I found it," she said. "Found what?" "The pressure point," Iris said. She spun her monitor around. It was a document from the County Recorder of Deeds, a lien filing. "Veronica took out a personal loan 6 months ago," Iris said, "from a private equity lender in New York. Hard money, high interest." "How much?" I asked. $2 million, Iris said. $2 million? What did she use for collateral? She doesn't have any assets. Iris pointed to a line on the document. Collateral. Assignment of beneficiary interest in the estate of Edmund Rivera. Anticipated distribution. She sold her inheritance, I whispered, before he was even dead. She bet against his life expectancy, Iris said grimly. And she lost the bet on the timing. The loan is due. Samantha, it has a balloon payment clause. If she doesn't pay it back by November 1st, the interest rate triples and they can seize her personal assets, which she doesn't have. That is why she is so desperate. I said, that is why she needs the settlement. She needs the cash to pay off the sharks. She is not just greedy, Iris said. She is drowning, and she is trying to use you as a life raft. It made sense now. The panic, the PR firm, the aggression. Veronica wasn't fighting for dominance. She was fighting for survival. If she didn't get control of the trust, she was going to be bankrupt. And if the trustee exposes her theft, I asked, then she goes to jail, Iris said, and she loses the money, and the lenders come for her. It is total annihilation. I sat down. I thought about my sister. I thought about the little girl who used to braid my hair before she got too popular to talk to me. I thought about the woman who called me a leech. She is terrified. I said, yes, Iris said, and terrified animals are dangerous. The call for mediation came 2 hours later. Lyle Sterling invited us to a private conference at his office. No court reporter, no judge, just us. We sat in the same glass-walled conference room. The view was still spectacular. The tension was thicker. Veronica looked tired. The makeup was heavy, but it couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. She didn't look at me. We have a new proposal, Lyle said. He slid a folder across the table. $500,000, he said. Cash. Immediate wire transfer upon signing. I looked at the number, $500,000. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to start over. And the conditions? Iris asked. Lyle cleared his throat, the same as before regarding the renunciation of claims. Plus, a confidentiality agreement with a liquidated damages clause of $1 million for any breach. And? Iris asked. And a public statement, Lyle said, apologizing for the stress caused to the family and affirming Veronica's integrity as the executor. I looked at Veronica. She was staring at her hands. You need the statement, don't you? I said. Veronica looked up. Her eyes were hollow. I don't know what you are talking about. You need it for the lenders. I said, you need to show them that the legal threat is gone so they don't call the loan. Lyle stiffened. That is privileged information. It is public record, Iris said. We saw the lien. Lyle, we know she is underwater. Veronica slammed her hand on the table. It wasn't a performative slam. It was real anger. You don't understand anything, she shouted. You think this is easy? You think keeping this family afloat is free? I did what I had to do. You stole from the foundation. I said quietly, you funneled money to Julian Vane. Veronica's face went white. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. I said, the trustee knows, and on October 14th, the judge is going to know. Veronica stood up. She was trembling. Take the money. Samantha, she hissed, take the $500,000 and go, because if you don't, I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will make sure everyone knows you are the reason Dad died of stress. You are lying. I said, I will make it true, she screamed. I have North Star. I have the press. I will bury you. Lyle put a hand on her arm. Veronica, sit down. She shook him off. She leaned over the table, her face inches from mine. You are nothing, she spat. You are a footnote. Take the money. I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. She was begging me to save her, but she only knew how to ask with a knife in her hand. No, I said. Veronica stared at me for a long second. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room. The heavy glass door swung shut behind her. Lyle looked at us. He closed the folder. See you in court, he said. He sounded tired. I drove back to the motel in silence. I felt sick. The hatred in Veronica's eyes was something I would never forget. I stopped at the diner on the way. I needed coffee. I needed to be around normal people who weren't trying to destroy each other. Marcy Holt was there. She was waiting for a takeout order. She saw me and froze. Then she walked over to my booth. Ms. Rivera. She said, sit down. Marcy. I said, please. She sat. She looked miserable. I need to tell you something, she said. Before the hearing, what is it? There is an invoice, she said, from last year, for $20,000, okay? I signed it, she whispered. Veronica told me it was urgent. She said it was for emergency relief supplies, but the vendor it was a travel agency. It paid for her trip to Milan, I guessed. Marcy nodded. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid. She said if I didn't sign it, she would tell your father I was incompetent. She said she would fire me. So I signed it. She looked down at the table, tears forming in her eyes. I am sorry. I helped her steal. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. Marcy, look at me. She looked up. You were scared. I said, she had power over you. That is how she works. She bullies people. I should have said no. Marcy said, you are saying no now. I said, that is what matters. You are coming to court. You are going to tell the truth. But I signed it. She said, I am complicit. I squeezed her hand. If you tell the truth, I will ask the judge for leniency. I will tell them you were coerced. My father knew you were in a bad spot. That is why he gave you the watch box. He didn't blame you. Marcy wiped her eyes. He was a good man. He was a complicated man. I said, but he didn't like bullies, And neither do I. Marcy took a deep breath. I will testify. I will tell them everything. Thank you. I said, 2 days before the hearing. Iris called me into her office. The mood was grim. We have a problem. She said, What now? The trustee. She said, Gideon Price. What about him? He hasn't filed anything. Iris said, The deadline for the pre-hearing exhibits was yesterday at 5 o'clock. The docket is empty. What does that mean? I asked. It means he is either incredibly incompetent or he is refusing to participate. Iris said, Or what? Or he has been compromised. Iris said, Veronica has leverage on everyone. Maybe she found something on him. Maybe she paid him off. But the watch, I said, Trust the trustee. Watches break. Samantha, Iris said, If Price doesn't show up with those documents on Monday, we are walking into a gunfight with no ammo. We have your testimony, and we have Marcy, but without the trust schedules, we can't prove the theft. We can't prove the assets exist. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. What if my father's plan had failed? What if he built a trap, but the spring was rusted? We have to go forward. I said, We have the Celine Park affidavit. We have the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is anonymous, Iris reminded me, and the affidavit proves intent, not theft. We need the schedules. She looked at her calendar. I am going to file a motion for contempt against the trustee, but it won't be heard until the hearing. So we wait. I said, We wait. Iris agreed, and we pray he walks through that door. The night before the hearing, the phone in my motel room rang. Not my cell phone, the landline on the bedside table. Nobody knew I was staying there except Iris and Marcy. I picked it up. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice. It was male, smooth, and utterly devoid of emotion. It sounded like a recording, but it wasn't. Ms. Rivera, the voice said. Who is this? Stop digging, the voice said. What? You are asking questions that shouldn't be asked. You are looking into accounts that are closed. Stop digging. You will lose everything. Is this North Star? I asked. Is this Julian Vane? The voice ignored me. Go home. Ms. Rivera. Take the settlement. The system is designed to protect itself. You are just a variable, and variables get removed. The line went dead. I sat there, holding the receiver. My hand was shaking. This wasn't Veronica screaming. This wasn't a sisterly spat. This was corporate. This was the voice of money protecting money. The system is designed to protect itself. Was the trustee part of the system? Was my father part of it? I hung up the phone. I walked to the door and checked the lock. It was flimsy. A good kick would take it down. I pushed the dresser in front of the door. I sat on the bed and opened the watch box. The watch was ticking away. Tick, tick, tick. It was still 2 minutes fast. I looked at my own reflection in the dark window. I looked tired. I looked scared. But beneath the fear, I saw something else. I saw my father's jawline. I saw his stubbornness. They wanted me to run. They wanted me to be the weak little sister who took the cash and faded away. I closed the box. I wasn't going to run. I started to rehearse. I didn't have a script. I didn't have North Star Narrative Group writing my lines. I stood in front of the mirror. My name is Samantha Rivera. I said to the empty room. I didn't try to sound innocent. Innocent people sound defensive. They whine. They explain. I tried to sound true. My name is Samantha Rivera. I said again, my voice lower, steadier. My father was Edmund Rivera. He built this company, and he watched it being stolen. I practiced until my voice stopped shaking. I practiced until the fear turned into a cold. Hard knot in my chest. I checked the watch. October 14th, midnight. The day had arrived. Trust the trustee. The card said, I didn't trust the trustee. I didn't trust the law. I didn't trust my sister. But I trusted the time, and the time was now. The courtroom was not empty this time. It was packed, but not with the curious public or the bored retirees who usually populated the gallery of the Briar Glen Probate Court. This audience had been curated. I sat at the defense table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck. Veronica had brought a squad. There were women in expensive athleisure wear who I recognized from her Instagram feed, the wellness circle she cultivated. There were men in tailored suits who looked like they worked in finance or branding, sitting with their legs crossed, checking their phones with an air of important boredom. And in the second row, a woman with a tablet was taking notes furiously, her eyes darting between me and the judge. She was a consultant from North Star Narrative Group. This wasn't a legal proceeding to them. It was a brand activation. It was a crisis management event. Veronica sat at the plaintiff's table, looking every inch the tragic heroine. She wore a navy dress today, high-necked, modest, with a single strand of pearls. It was the uniform of old money, of stability, of the grieving daughter who was just trying to do the right thing. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before the judge even entered the room. I wore my charcoal suit. I had no entourage. I had Iris Weller, who was currently arranging 3 stacks of binders on the table with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an amputation. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Henderson swept in, his black robes billowing. He looked tired. He had been dealing with the motions and counter-motions for weeks, and I could tell he wanted this over. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the packed gallery with distaste. "This is an evidentiary hearing regarding the estate of Edmund Rivera." The judge said, "I will remind everyone in the gallery that this is a court of law, not a theater. Any outbursts, any disruptions, and I will clear the room." He looked at Iris. "Call your first witness. I call Samantha Rivera," Iris said. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled in the last 10 minutes. I walked to the witness stand, the wood creaking softly under my heels. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. The chair was hard. The microphone was a black snakehead poised in front of my face. "Ms. Rivera," Iris began, standing behind the podium. "State your name and your relationship to the decedent." "Samantha Rivera," I said. My voice was steady, lower than usual. "Edmund Rivera was my father." "Tell the court about your employment history." Iris said, "I have worked for the last 8 years as a grant administrator for a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. I said, "Before that, I worked in program development for an educational charity." "And your financial status?" Iris asked. "Are you dependent on your family for support?" "No," I said. "I have been financially independent since I was 22. I pay my own rent. I pay my own bills. I have never asked my father for a monthly allowance." Iris nodded, pacing slightly. "Did your father ever offer you money?" "Yes," I said. "He offered to buy me a condo 3 years ago." "And did you accept?" "No. Why not?" "Because nothing with my father was free." I said. I looked at the judge. He believed that money was leverage. I wanted a relationship with him, not a transaction. So I declined. The gallery murmured. I saw the North Star consultant typing faster. "Ungrateful daughter refuses gift." That would be the headline. Iris moved to the table and picked up a document. "Ms. Rivera, were you offered a settlement by your sister to drop your inquiries into the estate?" "Yes," I said, "twice. The most recent offer was $500,000. "And you refused?" "I did." "Why?" Iris asked. "If you are the Leech that the plaintiff claims you are, why turn down $500,000 in cash?" "Because I don't want the money," I said. I looked at Veronica. She was staring at the table, her jaw set. "I want to know where the assets went. I want to know why the trust schedules are missing. I want to know why my father's company was bleeding cash before he died. I am not here for a payout. I am here for an accounting." "Thank you," Iris said. "Your witness." Lyle Sterling stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Rivera," he said, walking toward me. "You say you wanted a relationship, not a transaction, but you live 2 hours away. You visited, what, 3 times a year? 4 or 5. I said, 4 or 5, Lyle repeated, mocking the number. Your sister lived here. She worked with him every day. She cared for him. She managed his affairs. You were absent. I had a job. I said, I had a life. You had a life that didn't include him. Lyle said, and now that he is gone, you have inserted yourself into a business you don't understand. You are disrupting the foundation's work. You are causing stress to your grieving sister. Do you think that is what a loving daughter does? I think a loving daughter asks questions when she sees theft. I said, theft? Lyle laughed. That is a strong word. You have no proof of theft. You have suspicions. You have jealousy. You have a sense of entitlement because you feel left out. Isn't that the truth? Ms. Rivera? You were the outsider, and now you want to burn down the house because you didn't get the keys. No, I said, you are angry. Lyle pressed, leaning on the railing of the witness box. You are angry that he trusted Veronica and he didn't trust you. You are angry that he left her in charge. So you are dragging her through the mud. You are the leech, Ms. Rivera. You are sucking the life out of this family's reputation to feed your own ego. I felt the anger rising, hot and fast, behind my eyes. I wanted to snap at him. I wanted to tell him he was a paid liar. My hands shook in my lap. I took a breath. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the watch. Tick, 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 my father's watch. 2 minutes fast. He had planned this. He knew they would say this. I looked up at Lyle. My face was calm. I am not angry. Mr. Sterling, I said quietly, I am patient. Lyle frowned. He didn't like the answer. It didn't fit the script. No further questions. He snapped. I stepped down. My legs were shaking as I walked back to the table. But I kept my head high. I sat down next to Iris. You did good, she whispered. I feel sick, I whispered back. Iris stood up. The defense calls Marceline Holt. Marcy walked in from the hallway. She looked terrified. She was wearing a brown cardigan and clutching her purse like a shield. She took the stand, her voice barely a whisper as she swore the oath. Ms. Holt, Iris said gently, where were you employed until 3 months ago? The Edmund Rivera Renewal Fund. Marcy said, I was the bookkeeper. And why did you leave? I was terminated. Marcy said, Ms. Holt, during your time at the foundation, did you notice any unusual spending patterns? Objection. Lyle said, the witness is a disgruntled former employee. Overruled, the judge said. It goes to credibility. Answer the question. Yes, Marcy said. Starting about 18 months ago, we began paying large consulting fees to a firm called North Star Narrative Group. And what services did North Star provide? Iris asked. I don't know, Marcy said. The invoices were vague. Strategic alignment, reputation management. But we were a charitable foundation. We gave grants to libraries. We didn't need reputation management. How much money was paid to North Star? Over $300,000. Marcy said, Iris handed a document to the bailiff to give to the witness. Do you recognize this invoice? Yes. Marcy said. Her face flushed. Can you read the amount and the vendor? $20,000. Marcy read, payable to Vain Travel. And what was this for? Marcy looked at Veronica. Veronica was staring at her, her eyes wide, her face tight with a mixture of rage and fear. It was the look of someone watching a dam crack. Ms. Holt? Iris prompted. It was for a trip to Milan. Marcy whispered. For Ms. Veronica Rivera. And did Ms. Rivera threaten your job if you didn't process this payment? Yes, Marcy said. She said I was replaceable. She said if I didn't sign it, she would tell her father I was incompetent. The courtroom was silent. The North Star consultant had stopped typing. The supporters in the gallery were shifting in their seats. This wasn't brand management. This was fraud. Thank you. Ms. Holt, Iris said. Lyle Sterling didn't cross-examine her. He knew better. Marcy was crying, and attacking a crying woman who had just admitted to being bullied would only make Veronica look worse. Call your next witness, The judge said, "We have no further witnesses at this time." Iris said, "But we reserve the right to recall regarding the trust documents." The judge looked at the plaintiff's table. "Ms. Rivera, take the stand." Veronica stood up. She smoothed her dress. She walked to the stand with a dignity that was almost impressive. Considering what had just been said, she sat down and looked at the gallery, offering a brave, sad smile to her friends. "Ms. Rivera," Lyle said, "you heard the testimony regarding the travel invoice. Can you explain that?" Veronica sighed. "It was a misunderstanding. The trip to Milan was for a donor gala. We were courting international philanthropists. It was business. Poor Marcy. She never really understood the big picture. She is a simple woman. I am sure she felt overwhelmed." "And North Star Narrative Group?" Lyle asked. "Essential," Veronica said firmly. "In today's climate, a foundation needs a voice. We were modernizing. My father understood that. He approved every strategic pivot. Did your father approve of your sister's involvement?" Veronica laughed softly. It was a cruel sound. Samantha wasn't involved. She never came to the office. She never came to the galas. She was never really part of Dad's world. She looked at me then. The mask slipped just a fraction. "Dad loved her," Veronica said, "but he knew she was weak. He knew she couldn't handle the pressure of the legacy. That is why he left me in charge. That is why he gave me the keys. He wanted to protect her from her own incompetence." It hit me in the chest. Not the accusation of incompetence, but the grain of truth she was twisting. My father had kept me away. He had kept me in the dark. But was it to protect me? Or was it to use me? "Your sister claims you are hiding assets." Lyle said, "I am hiding nothing." Veronica said, "I am waiting for the process. My sister is the one dragging this out. She is the one causing the pain. She has always been a taker. She took his attention when we were kids by being the quiet one. She took his money for tuition, and now she wants to take the company." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "She didn't know him, Your Honor. She didn't hold his hand when he was dying." "I did. She was a stranger." I gripped the edge of the table. The watch in my pocket felt heavy, like a stone. "Hold on," I told myself. "Wait for the bell." Iris stood up for cross-examination. "She didn't use the podium. She walked right up to the witness box." "Ms. Rivera," Iris said, "you say your father approved the North Star payments. Do you have his signature on any of the contracts?" "He gave verbal approval," Veronica said. "Verbal," Iris repeated. "And the invoice for the Milan trip? Verbal approval for that too?" "Yes. And the loan you took out 6 months ago?" Iris asked sharply. "The $2 million personal loan from a high-interest lender in New York. Did he approve that?" Veronica froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Objection!" Lyle shouted. "Irrelevant. Personal finances. It goes to motive." "Your Honor," Iris shouted back, "the witness is heavily in debt. She borrowed against an inheritance she hadn't received yet. That is a motive for embezzlement." "I will allow it," the judge said. "Answer the question." "Ms. Rivera, I needed liquidity." Veronica stammered. For business ventures. And did you use the foundation's money to service that debt?" Iris asked. "Did you use the consulting fees to Julian Vane's shell company to pay your interest?" "No," Veronica shouted. "That is a lie." "Then where did the money go?" Iris slammed a piece of paper on the railing. "We have the wire transfers. We have the path. It goes from the foundation to Marrowgate Strategies to Blue Jay Holdings. Who owns Blue Jay Holdings?" "Ms. Rivera?" "I don't know," Veronica screamed. "I don't know the details. I hired people to handle it. You hired your ex-boyfriend, Julian Vane." Iris pressed. Lyle Sterling was on his feet, shouting objections. The judge was banging his gavel. The gallery was buzzing. The polished facade of the North Star launch had shattered. Veronica was red-faced, panting, looking like a cornered animal. "Order!" the judge bellowed. "Order in this court!" He glared at Iris. "Ms. Weller, step back." Iris stepped back. She looked at Veronica with cold satisfaction. No further questions. Veronica stumbled down from the stand. She didn't look at her friends. She sat down and buried her face in her hands. Call your next witness. The judge said, I call Daryl Klein. Iris said. Daryl looked like a man walking to the gallows. He took the stand, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Mr. Klein, Iris said, you were Edmund Rivera's attorney for 40 years. I was, Daryl said. Did you prepare the will? I did. And did you prepare the trust schedules? Daryl hesitated. He looked at me, then at Veronica. No. Why not? Edmund. Mr. Rivera. He took the files. Daryl said, about 6 months ago. He said he was making revisions. He said there was a betrayal in-house. A betrayal? Iris asked. Did he specify? He said someone was drilling holes in the boat. Daryl said softly. And what about the trustee? Gideon Price. Did you select him? No, Daryl said. Edmund selected him. He told me Price was a cleaner. He said Price would handle the disclosure at the proper moment. And when is the proper moment? Iris asked. Daryl looked at the clock on the wall. I believe it is today. Thank you, Mr. Klein. The courtroom was quiet now. The energy had shifted. It wasn't about a sisterly feud anymore. It was about a dead man's secret. I call Dr. Celine Park, Iris said. Celine walked in. She was the only person in the room who looked entirely comfortable. She wore a sharp gray suit and carried a leather portfolio. She took the stand and adjusted the microphone. Dr. Park, Iris said. What is your profession? I am a compliance consultant, Celine said. I specialize in trust governance and anti-corruption mechanisms. Did Edmund Rivera hire you? Yes. For what purpose? To design a conditional disclosure protocol for his estate. Celine said, her voice was crisp, clinical. Can you explain that to the court? Mr. Rivera was concerned that his estate would be looted. Celine said, he was also concerned that his heirs would be attacked. He asked me to create a tripwire. And what does this tripwire do? It seals the assets and the evidence in a blind trust. Celine explained. The trustee is instructed to remain silent until specific trigger events occur. What are the events? Iris asked. A public claim of undue influence. Celine listed. An attempt to coerce a beneficiary and a verified instance of financial irregularity. Have these conditions been met? Yes. Celine said. They have all been met. So what happens now? Now, Celine said, looking at the judge. The trustee is required to present the sealed exhibits. He is required to reveal the truth. The judge leaned forward. He looked at the defense table. He looked at the plaintiff's table. Where is the trustee? The judge asked. Silence. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mr. Sterling? The judge asked. Do you have the trustee? No, Your Honor, Lyle said. He looked nervous. We haven't been able to reach him. Ms. Weller? No, Your Honor, Iris said. He has not responded to our subpoenas. The judge frowned. This is unacceptable. We have a multi-million-dollar estate, allegations of fraud, and a missing trustee. I am inclined to hold Mr. Price in contempt. I am inclined to dissolve the trust and appoint a receiver. My heart stopped. If the judge dissolved the trust, the evidence might be lost. The tripwire might fail. Veronica might get away with it, or the state might step in and freeze everything for years. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the watch. I held it under the table. I looked at the face. 2:02 p.m. The card said 2 p.m. He was late. For the first time, a crack of true panic opened in my chest. My father was never late. His plan was precision. Had Gideon Price been bought? Had he been threatened? Had he simply decided not to play the game? I looked at Veronica. She was lifting her head. She saw the confusion. She saw the judge's anger. A glint of hope returned to her eyes. If the trustee didn't show, the case would stall. She could survive a stall. I looked at the watch again. Tick, tick, tick. 2 minutes past the deadline. My father's watch was fast. It was always fast. Wait, If the watch was fast, that meant real time was behind. I looked at the clock on the courtroom wall. 1:58 p.m. He wasn't late. The watch was 2 minutes fast. I was 2 minutes early. I held my breath. I stared at the double doors at the back of the courtroom. 5, 4, 3. The second hand on the wall clock swept up to the 12, 2, 1. Boom. The heavy oak doors swung open. The sound was like a thunderclap in the quiet room. Heads whipped around. The North Star consultant gasped. A court clerk stood in the doorway, looking flustered. "Your Honor," the clerk called out. "What is it?" the judge snapped. "We have a late arrival," the clerk said, stepping aside. "He is requesting entry under official standing. He says he is the trustee." A man walked through the doors. He was tall, wearing a black suit that looked like it had been cut from a shadow. He carried 2 large, silver briefcases. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at Veronica. He didn't look at me. He walked straight down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing on the floorboards. The crowd parted for him instinctively. He moved with the terrifying, absolute confidence of a man who holds all the cards. He stopped at the gate. He looked up at the judge. "Apologies for the timing, Your Honor," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly. "My instructions were precise. I could not enter until the clock struck 2. He placed the silver briefcases on the table. "I am Gideon Price," he said, "and I am here to execute the will of Edmund Rivera." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I clutched the watch in my hand so tight the metal bit into my palm. The trap had snapped shut. The room didn't just go quiet. It went cold. It was as if someone had opened a window in the middle of winter, letting in a draft that chilled the sweat on our necks. Gideon Price walked past the rail, the silver briefcases swinging slightly with the rhythm of his stride. He was a man who occupied space with the density of a black hole. He was older than I expected, perhaps in his 60s, with hair the color of iron filings and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then polished by decades of expensive scotch and difficult conversations. Behind him, a court officer carried a stack of thick, sealed packets, looking nervous to be in such close proximity to the man. Veronica's posture collapsed. It wasn't a subtle shift. Her shoulders slumped, her chin dropped, and her hands, which had been resting confidently on the table, suddenly gripped the edge as if the floor were tilting. Her body knew. Before her brain could process the legal implications, her survival instinct recognized the predator in the room. "Mr. Price," Judge Henderson said. His voice was sharp, annoyed. "You are late. You are in contempt of this court's timeline. I apologize." "Your Honor," Price said. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone that carried without effort. "I assure you, the delay was not a matter of disrespect. It was a matter of compliance." "Compliance with what?" the judge asked. "With the specific instructions of the grantor." "Edmund Rivera," Price said. He placed the briefcases on the table and snapped the latches open. The sound was loud, metallic, final. Click, clack. My instructions were to remain silent and invisible until a trigger condition was met. Price continued, "The trust protocol is explicit. I was forbidden from appearing or producing the schedules until 2 specific events occurred simultaneously in a court of record." "And what are those events?" the judge asked, leaning over the bench. "First," Price said, lifting a finger, "a public claim of undue influence against a named beneficiary. Second, an attempt to coerce said beneficiary into a renunciation of their rights through intimidation or reputational damage." He turned slowly and looked at Veronica. It was the first time he had acknowledged her presence. His gaze was flat, clinical, like a doctor examining a tumor. The testimony given in this room today satisfied the final condition at 1:58 this afternoon. Price said, "The trap is sprung." The gallery was dead silent. The North Star consultant had stopped typing. Even the air conditioning seemed to have paused. Price reached into the briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue leather. "Your Honor," he said. handing it to the bailiff. "These are the missing schedules for the Rivera Legacy Trust. They were never missing. They were held in escrow with the clerk of the Federal District Court, subject to the trigger release." The bailiff handed the document to the judge. Judge Henderson put on his reading glasses. He opened the binder. The silence that followed was heavy. It was a humiliating silence. For weeks, we had been fighting, arguing, screaming about these documents. Veronica had built an entire campaign on the idea that they didn't exist or that I had stolen them, and all this time, they had been sitting in a vault, waiting for us to prove who we really were. The judge read. He turned a page, then another. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Price," the judge said, "this structure? It is unusual. It is necessary." Price corrected. The judge looked at the lawyers. The assets in question, the liquidity from the refinance, the equity in Blue Heron Freight Works, are all accounted for. They are listed here, down to the penny. Veronica let out a small, strangled sound of relief. If the money was there, maybe she could still fight for it. Maybe she could still pay off the loan. However, the judge continued, his voice hardening. "The distribution terms are not what I expected." He looked at Veronica. "Ms. Rivera," the judge said, "you are not the primary beneficiary of this trust." Veronica stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "That is impossible. I am the executor. I am the chair of the foundation." "Sit down. Ms. Rivera," the judge barked. Veronica sat, but she was shaking. "Mr. Price," the judge said, "explain the second schedule." Price stepped forward. He didn't look at his notes. He knew this by heart. Edmund Rivera was aware of the financial irregularities within the foundation. Price said he was aware of the invoices to North Star Narrative Group. He was aware of the pass-through payments to Blue Jay Holdings, and he was aware of the personal loans taken against the estate. Veronica's face turned the color of ash. "Because of this documented misuse of funds," Price said, his voice devoid of judgment, simply stating facts. "The grantor included a restriction clause. Veronica Rivera is explicitly barred from holding any fiduciary role in any entity controlled by the estate. She is removed as chair. She is removed from the board of Blue Heron. She is eligible for a monthly stipend, capped at the median national income, provided she submits to quarterly drug testing and financial audits." A gasp went through the room. It wasn't a disinheritance. It was a demotion. It was a leash. My father hadn't cut her off. He had grounded her. He had turned her from a queen into a dependent. Lyle Sterling stood up. "Objection. This is hearsay. These allegations of misuse have not been proven. They have been documented," Price said coolly. He pulled a second binder from the briefcase. Exhibit B, copies of the wire transfers, the split invoices, and the correspondence between Veronica Rivera and Julian Vane, confirming the kickback structure. He handed the binder to the bailiff. "Your Honor," Price said, "this evidence was collected by the grantor personally in the months before his death. He called it the consequences file." The judge took the binder. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at Veronica with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You will have a chance to respond to this, Ms. Rivera," the judge said. "But if these documents are authentic, I will be referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into embezzlement and fraud." Veronica put her head on the table. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just crumbled. The brand she had built, the glossy, perfect image of the heiress, dissolved in seconds. She wasn't a victim. She was a criminal who had been caught by her own father. I felt a strange, hollow ache in my chest. I looked at her, slumped and broken, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt sad. She had destroyed herself for money she didn't need, to impress people who didn't care. But Price wasn't finished. He turned to me. "Ms. Samantha Rivera," he said. I sat up straighter. I braced myself. Was this it? Was this the moment I got the windfall? The moment I became the rich heiress? The grantor was also concerned about you. Price said, Concerned? I asked, my voice trembling. He was concerned that a sudden infusion of unearned wealth would be as damaging to you as it was to your sister. Price said, he believed that money without purpose is a poison. He opened the third folder. Therefore, the trust does not grant you ownership of the principal assets. Price said, the millions in the account, the company shares, you do not own them. A murmur went through the gallery. The greedy sister wasn't getting the gold after all. The assets are to be placed into a perpetual charitable trust, Price explained. The Edmund Rivera Public Initiative. The mandate is to fund vocational training and housing stability programs in the tri-state area. He looked at me. You, Ms. Rivera, are appointed as the lead program officer. You will have a seat on the oversight committee. You will have a salary commensurate with your experience in the nonprofit sector. You will have a vote, but you will not have a checkbook. I stared at him. You will work for the legacy. Price said, you will not live off it. I felt the shock settle in, followed immediately by a rush of clarity. Of course he did this. He didn't give me the money. He gave me a job. He gave me the responsibility I had always craved. But he stripped it of the glamour. He made sure I couldn't be a leech even if I wanted to. I would have to show up every day. I would have to read the grant applications. I would have to earn the Rivera name over and over again. It was fair. It was incredibly, brutally fair. Veronica lifted her head. She looked at me, and then she looked at Price. Her eyes were wild. Bloodshot. You liar, she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at Price. You wrote this. You and Samantha cooked this up. Dad would never do this. He loved me. He wouldn't humiliate me like this. Price didn't flinch. He reached into the breast pocket of his suit coat. He pulled out a single envelope. It was cream-colored, sealed with wax. I expected this objection. Price said, and so did he. He handed the envelope to the judge. This letter is addressed to the court. Price said, it is in the decedent's handwriting. It was dated 3 days before his death. The judge opened the envelope. He unfolded the letter. The room was so quiet, I could hear the rustle of the paper. Read it. Veronica hissed. Read it. The judge looked at the paper, then at Veronica. He cleared his throat. To the presiding judge, he read aloud. If you are reading this, it means my daughter Veronica has challenged the trust. It means she has accused her sister of undue influence. It means she has brought lawyers and consultants into a room that should have been for family. The judge paused. Veronica will be angry. The judge read, she will claim forgery. She will claim conspiracy. And, knowing her as I do, she will call her sister a leech to distract from the ledger. The breath went out of the room. She will call her sister a leech. Veronica froze. Her mouth hung open. The specific phrasing, the exact insult she had used at the funeral, in the press, and in this very courtroom, was written in her dead father's hand. He knew her. He knew her script before she even wrote it. I do not do this to be cruel. The letter continued. I do this because I cannot leave a loaded weapon in the hands of a child who does not know how to handle it. Veronica needs limits to survive. Samantha needs purpose to survive. I am giving them both what they need, even if they hate me for it. Trust the trustee. He is the only one who isn't trying to win. Signed, Edmund Rivera. I closed my eyes. Tears finally leaked out. Hot and fast. Not cruelty, consequences. He saw us. He really saw us. He saw Veronica's greed not as a sin, but as a danger to herself. He saw my quietness not as weakness, but as a need for direction. He loved us enough to stop us. He loved us enough to lock the doors. Veronica was sobbing now. Not the pretty, staged crying she had done earlier. Ugly, deep, heaving sobs. The letter had stripped her naked. He knew. He had always known. And he had let her play out the string just to show the world who she was. The judge laid the letter down. He looked at Lyle Sterling. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, your client is in a very precarious position. Lyle looked pale. He was already packing his briefcase. He knew when a ship was sinking. However, Price interrupted. There is one final clause. The judge looked up. There is more? There is the conduct condition, Price said. He turned to the gallery. He looked at the reporters. He looked at the North Star consultant, who was now sitting very still, her hands in her lap. The grantor was adamant that the process of transition be respected. Price said, he included a scorched earth provision. What does it say? The judge asked. It states, Price said, that if the court finds that any party attempted to obstruct the disclosure, intimidate witnesses, or use public defamation to coerce a result, then the governance of the entire trust is forfeited. Forfeited by whom? The judge asked. By everyone, Price said. He looked at Veronica. Then he looked at me. If intimidation is proven, Price said, then neither Veronica Rivera nor Samantha Rivera will have any seat on the board. Neither will have a vote. Neither will have oversight. The entire estate will be turned over to an independent panel of professional trustees appointed by the state. The family will be removed from the legacy entirely. The room spun. Intimidation. Coercion. Veronica had bullied Marcy. She had used North Star to smear me. She had threatened me in the mediation room. The judge looked at Marcy Holt, sitting in the front row, clutching her purse. Ms. Holt, the judge said, you testified that you were threatened with termination if you did not sign fraudulent invoices. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Marcy whispered. And Ms. Rivera, the judge said to me, you testified that you were the subject of a smear campaign orchestrated by the plaintiff. Yes, Your Honor. I said. The judge sat back. He looked at the ceiling. He looked like a man who was appreciating the symmetry of a very complicated knot. Edmund Rivera built a machine, the judge said softly. A machine that judges the operator. He looked at Veronica. You bullied your bookkeeper, the judge said. You defamed your sister. You attempted to manipulate this court. He looked at me. And you? Ms. Rivera, the judge said. You stood your ground, but the terms of the trust are clear. The condition is not based on who started the fire. It is based on whether the fire was lit. He turned to Price. The intimidation is proven. The judge said, the condition is met. Price nodded solemnly. Then, Your Honor, the governance clause is triggered. The independent panel assumes control effective immediately. Veronica looked up. Wait, what does that mean? It means you are out. The judge said, you have no vote. You have no chair. But Samantha? Veronica stammered. The judge looked at me. It means she is out too. The judge said. I sat there, the realization washing over me like a cold wave. I had lost the job. I had lost the oversight. I had lost the chance to run the foundation, because my sister had fought dirty. We both lost the war. I looked at Price. He met my eyes. There was no apology in his face, only a grim confirmation. My father knew Veronica would fight dirty. He knew she would intimidate witnesses. He knew she would try to destroy me. So he built a system where her cruelty cost her everything. And he built a system where my willingness to endure that cruelty cost me the prize. It was the ultimate punishment for dysfunction. If we couldn't play by the rules, we didn't get to play at all. Veronica screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. She lunged across the table, grabbing for the binders. You can't do this. It's mine. It's my money. The bailiff moved fast. He caught her by the arms. She struggled, kicking and screaming, her pearls snapping and scattering across the floor like hail. Get off me! You are all thieves. You are all leeches. Lyle Sterling stepped away from her. The North Star consultant slipped out the back door. The friends in the gallery looked down at their shoes. Ms. Rivera, the judge shouted. Remove her from the courtroom. The bailiff dragged her toward the doors. She was still screaming, her voice raw and ugly. Samantha, fix this. Tell them. Samantha. The doors slammed shut. The silence rushed back in. I sat alone at the table. Iris put her hand on my arm. Samantha, she whispered, I am sorry. We won the argument, but we lost the estate. I said. I looked at the judge. He was signing an order. The court accepts the findings of the trustee. The judge said, "The Rivera Legacy Trust is hereby placed under independent governance. The matter of the fraud allegations against Veronica Rivera is referred to the district attorney. This hearing is adjourned." He banged the gavel. I stood up. My legs felt surprisingly steady. I walked over to Gideon Price. He was closing his briefcases. He knew. I said, Price looked at me. He didn't smile, but the lines around his eyes softened slightly. He knew she wouldn't stop. Price said, "And he knew you wouldn't back down. So he fired us both." I said, "He liberated you both." Price corrected. I frowned. Liberated? She is free from the money she would have used to kill herself. Price said, "And you, Ms. Rivera, you are free from the burden of managing a sister who would have hated you every day for the rest of her life." He picked up the briefcases. "You have your own life, Samantha. You have your own job. You have your own integrity. You don't need his name to exist." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the aisle. I stood there for a moment. I looked at the empty witness stand. I looked at the pearls scattered on the floor. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch. It was ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at the wall clock. 2:15. I looked at the watch. 2:17. It was still 2 minutes fast. I pulled the crown out. The ticking stopped. The second hand froze. I wound it backward. 2 minutes. I pushed the crown in. The second hand started again. It was synchronized now. It was on real time. I didn't need to be ahead anymore. I didn't need to be waiting for the trap. The trap was sprung. The game was over. I put the watch back in my pocket. I turned to Iris. "Buy you a drink?" I asked. Iris smiled. A genuine, tired smile. "I think you owe me about 5 drinks." We walked out of the courtroom, past the reporters who were shouting questions, past the wreckage of my family's reputation, and out into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. I didn't have the millions. I didn't have the foundation. I didn't have a sister. But as I walked down the courthouse steps, I took a deep breath of the humid air. It tasted like rain and asphalt and cheap coffee. It tasted like mine. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the tangled web of the Rivera family. Writing Samantha's story was an emotional ride, exploring how family trauma, greed, and the search for truth can collide in the most unexpected ways. I hope you enjoyed the twists, the courtroom drama, and the realistic, bittersweet ending. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a rainy afternoon in London, a busy morning in New York, or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed You Are a Leech and want more stories about justice, betrayal, and the complex human heart, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. I have many more tales to tell. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Edmund's final decision was fair? Was it cruelty? Or was it the ultimate act of protection? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, keep watching the clock.